Welcome to Suzanne's studio. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and tonight I am so pleased and honored to present a very, very fascinating couple. Myllicent and Jack Hamilton are a devoted married couple, but also they are so dedicated to being volunteers, and what they have done for our community is so interesting and so important that I just had to have them on the show. So here you are, Myllicent and Jack. Thank you so much for being here. What we're going to do is, we can all talk together, like they do on The View, which is awful. We're not going to do that. But I'd like the audience to know something about you. So, Myllicent, let's start with you.
Well, I do fill my time mainly with volunteering. I've done that most of my life when I wasn't working. And the main volunteer project that I have right now is at West Wind Barn. And I help with a class that teaches handicapped children to ride horses. And it's really fun. And our children come in wheelchairs and in walkers and all sorts of ways that they get around. And we have a lot of autistic children, so of course they don't have trouble walking. But it's a very interesting program, and I've done it for about the last 15 years.
But also the fact that you started riding horses when you were 3.
That's right.
And someone said that because you lived on a farm?
That's right.
And when you were 5, what happened? Didn't you get the cows in or something?
Oh, well, yes, I started riding. My father started putting me on a horse when I was 3. But I don't know, when I was about 6 or 7, my father would send me out into the pasture on a horse to round up the milking cows.
Yeah.
And bring them back to milk the cows for the evening. And I always just loved doing it because I got to ride the horses.
And do you think that the kids have the similar feelings?
I think they do. They just love the horses. They like to feel them. They pat their necks while they're riding them, and sometimes in order to give them exercise, the instructor has them turn around in the saddle and reach back to their tail or reach up to their ears. And so we have an arena where the children take the handicap riding classes, and we have an instructor that runs the class.
And I asked you about how you got the funding. And?
Well, I write a lot of grant applications. So we get grants from private foundations and private donors. And that is our main source of funding. Is some of our sponsors, some of our funders are like the Los Altos Rotary, the Los Altos Community Foundation. So we have, 6 or 8 organizations that help us by giving us grants.
And it's located, did we talk about the location?
I don't think we did.
Think so.
It's at West Wind Barn, which is in Los Altos Hills, and that's at the corner of Black Mountain and Altamont Road. And there's a big cream-colored barn there, which you can see from quite a ways away. And there's a lovely pasture beside it that's called Burn Preserve. And we're allowed to pasture our handicapped riding horses in the pasture.
So I guess you have to have the horses pretty well trained.
The horses are very well trained. When we buy horses that are at least 12 or 13 years old, so they aren't likely to run away or buck or anything, and they must be very gentle. We really have to carefully select our horses to be gentle.
Absolutely. Now, Jack, do you do anything up there?
Occasionally I do. I'm a sidewalker, and every time one of the handicapped children are on a horse and are participating in activities in the training session, it requires two sidewalkers and someone to lead the horse. So, and that steadies the handicapped child on the saddle.
Each child puts on a safety belt that has two little loops that go down on each side, and of course they have a safety helmet. But the sidewalker on each side of the horse holds that one of those loops, so if they start tipping one way or the other, they can get them righted back into the middle of the saddle.
So they're really safe.
They are
Yeah,
very
safe.
safe.
Yeah, they would have to be.
Yes.
And can you see growth in these kids?
Definitely.
In what way?
Well, one little girl we remember particularly, she took our sessions are 10 weeks long and they follow the school year. And after about 3 sessions, you could tell her back was really strengthened. So she sat up straighter, and she could just stand straighter too. And that's one of the things that horseback riding does. It builds core muscles, and it stretches the pelvic area and strengthens the legs. So all those things are good.
And I have to tell the audience, you're not expecting this. We got together last week to talk about the show, and I said, no, Myllicent, I don't exactly know what to say about you, because you had your profession, which was a medical
technology.
Yeah, and you've done so many things. And your husband, I guess, who's crazy about you, he said, she's a Wonder Woman. I thought that was so dear. How many years have you been married?
Almost 54 years.
That's because of your book, huh? So, Jack, you have a MS from Stanford, and you have a PhD. That's very impressive. What's your PhD in?
It's in counseling psychology, also from Stanford.
Yeah. So, shall we call you doctor?
No, just call me Jack.
Oh, okay, okay. So, Jack, tell us about you.
Well, what I'd like to say about me is that a little over 20 years ago, I stumbled into a career after having had several careers before that, the career that really fits me very well, and that is a mediator. So I've been involved in mediation work now for, as I said, over 20 years. And the reason I got so impressed with it and I've enjoyed it so much is that the process is so powerful. It is such an enabling process in terms of helping the people who come to the mediation table work through their issues and come to resolution.
So that leads us into your book. Tell us about that hot book.
Well, we have published a book, 3 co-authors and myself. We're all business partners. And it's entitled Conflict, the Unexpected Gift. And the subtitle is Making the Most of Disputes in Life and Work. And the reason we decided, it took us nearly 4 years to write it, the reason we started writing it was because even though disputants who were at the mediation table worked hard, 2-3 hours of mediation work, and they were able to come to agreements and resolution, they walked out the door often with hugs, and almost always at least with shaking hands. We had a question in our minds often, what did they take away from the mediation that they could then apply in their own lives after that, and perhaps be able to resolve conflicts before they had to come to a mediation table? And we thought if we could we draw upon the mediation process and write a book that would teach the readers how to resolve their own conflicts, we would be benefiting many, many more people that way.
And has that worked, do you think?
Well, so far we think it has, yes.
Yeah.
We've been teaching some classes based on the book, and of course it is available on the internet, at online booksellers, and so we're very hopeful in that regard.
Well, we were talking about one of the main things that people have problems with, anybody, is they don't really listen. They don't hear you.
Right.
Would you mind reading about that
I would be
a little
glad to.
bit? Yeah, I was very impressed with that.
Actually, one of the, I think, most important chapters in the book, and some of our readers have told us that this is the chapter that really stands out for them, and it's called, of course, Listening.
Yeah.
So this is a part of a paragraph. Listening for understanding is neither giving advice nor telling people why they shouldn't feel the way they do. It is listening so you understand where the other person is coming from. And at this point, you are not trying to solve anything for them. You are simply paying close attention to them. And we found that there are 4 essential components of listening for understanding. The first one is encouraging the other person to expand upon what they have been saying to you, bringing them out, trying to tell you more about what's on their mind. And the second one is by asking clarifying questions of another person. If you're a little bit confused as to what you're hearing, asking them some clarifying questions which will give you a better understanding of what they are talking about. Mm-hmm. And then another component is by restating and reflecting back what you have heard from the other person, so that you can find out if they feel that they have been heard. And that's so critical, that feeling of being heard by another person. And then finally, the fourth component is when you can summarize the main points and feelings that you've heard throughout the other person's story or account.
How often, I'm going to be the devil's advocate. I don't believe any of that.
Uh-oh.
I mean, it sounds so perfect, but how many people, unless they're taking a class, having mediation, how many people will do that, Jack?
It's a good point. Not very many. What we have found is that when we start out in life, we observe our parents, we see how they communicate, and we basically learn to communicate by competing with the other person, trying to get my word in. I'm not really too much interested in what you're saying, but when you take a breath, boy, here's my chance to say what I want to say. And so instead of listening to you, I'm trying to figure out in my mind what I want to say when you take a breath. And so we learn these kind of dysfunctional ways of communicating with very little, if any, experience or training in how to listen for understanding to another person.
So, how does it work? How can you, well, this is very intrusive, but this is what the audience really likes to hear. You ready?
Okay.
You weren't planning on this. But, I mean, I know you two really, really love each other, and you've been married for a long time. But how have you dealt with, I really would like to know, and so would the audience, it's hot. No, but I'm sure you must have had differences. So what's happened in your relationship?
Well, one thing that Myllicent is a very organized person. And so I have a tendency to leave things around, papers on a desk, papers on a dining room table, whatever, and she views that as clutter. So when she'll say to me, I see an awful lot of papers on the table. What are you going to do about it? And then in my mind, what I first think is, well, I'll get to it later, But I've learned that she likes to have a reasonable amount of order where we live, and it's important for me to respond to her request and take care of, the clutter that I've contributed to.
So, but it sounds to me that you're very cooperative. But what if you weren't? How would you have handled that?
Well, I would keep asking him until he did it. But, and I can remember back when earlier years we would have angry fights, and we found that if we just took a break and then come back and to settle it after we both had a chance to think about it and take a break.
Boy,
that helped me.
That's very good advice, isn't it?
And I can tell you something more about what I've learned. It took me a long time, but when I would do something that would offend Myllicent, I always thought that I didn't intend to offend her, so I don't need to apologize, So I mean, I had good intentions, and so why should I have to apologize? Well, it took a long time, but finally I came to an understanding that whatever I did offend her, and I should take responsibility for it and apologize. And it was like an epiphany that I'm not going to do. So I'm going to be doing some things some of the time that bother her.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact of life,
Yeah.
and I need to take responsibility for those occurrences and apologize to her.
Yeah, that's the way I've always viewed it. If you do something that hurts someone or something, you have to apologize for it.
Well, I've known you all for, not intimately, but I've known you, and I would say you're one of the happiest couples I've seen. So I wasn't planning on asking you this, but I wonder about people that have been married for so long. But this listening thing, obviously you both listen to each other.
Yes, that's important to, hear what it is that's bothering the other person, or you'll never get the problem solved.
But so many people will interrupt. Like you said, everybody wants to give their opinion, their right. I can't be wrong. I have to be right. So I'm not going to even hear you. So that's why, if we could get it across to people to be good listeners.
Well, it's kind of human nature when you hear something from somebody that doesn't quite square with the way you think about a situation. It's human nature to think, oh, I've got to tell her the way I think about it. And if we can learn that it's really more effective to say, she's got the right to have a different viewpoint on whatever's going on, and it's up to me to try to understand where she's coming from.
Yes.
And if we can try to do that, it's much more effective.
But how can you get that across if people don't read your book? How are they going to learn this, Jack?
Well, we try to, if we can do it in our own lives, then if the people we relate to may see us in action and learn something from that. So it's a long-term process, and we also teach classes.
Oh, tell about that.
Well, we, for years, my business partners and I have taught workshops, and we've taught in junior high schools and in college faculties and so forth. And we used to give all-day workshops. And one time when we had finished a all-day workshop, one of the students came up to me and said to me, I think I understand what you two, there were two instructors at the time, what you two are doing, what you're really trying to accomplish. And she said, you're trying to build world peace one relationship at a time.
How beautiful that is. What did you think?
Well, I thought it takes a long time to build world peace, one relationship at a time. And I suppose in my lifetime, we're not going to quite accomplish that. But that's what will get us there. If we can teach people how to resolve differences that they have with other people, it'll spread and we'll eventually get there, hopefully.
Of course, of course.
You know, what I experience in this whole issue of listening is that it's an act of will to stop yourself from interrupting and listen until the other person is finished with their idea, and then you can say yours.
But, when you say, in a social situation, I think we try to be popular and impress people. Don't you think it's a little difficult sometimes to hear what the other person's saying, because I'm thinking about what can I say that'll be really impressive, But that's human nature.
That's human nature.
But just even a little bit goes a long way. I really recommend your book. And it's easy reading. Right?
We tried to make it easy and down to earth, and it's filled with actual accounts that people have shared with us, and they gave us permission to put them in the book as long as we didn't mention their names. So there's accounts of two roommates in college having a conflict, a woman having a conflict with her father, and it lasted for years and years and years, or a daughter with a mother, and on and on and on.
And what about 60% of marriages end in divorce? 60%. Wow. What if they could get over their conflicts?
Right.
I mean, how do things change from being madly in love, wanting to get married, and then divorcing each other, hating each other?
Right. And then you get to be polarized, and
exactly.
you can only see the negative in the other person, and it kind of keeps you from seeing all those positives that you originally saw in the person.
Well, one of the reasons, if I may make an assumption, but I really feel that you two are among the happiest people that I've known. And one of the reasons, obviously, is there's chemistry and you love each other and so forth. But I think the fact that both of you have been lifelong volunteers helping other people, that's what it's about too. Don't
Having
you think?
Common values.
No, but I'm saying, that too. But I'm saying the fact that you've helped so many people. You're volunteering. You're not getting money. You're doing it from your heart, your soul.
Well, I had good examples. My parents were always volunteers. They volunteered in their church, of course, and they volunteered in the community. Like, they were both 4-H leaders, and it's kind of ironic. I was in 4-H when I was a child, and now I'm in 4-H again.
Isn't that interesting? It makes a circle. Well, we're practically at the end of the program, and I would like to ask you another question. Don't shake. I don't know how to put this, but I'll just put it in my own words. What right now is the most important thing in your life? I'm going to ask you that too. Myllicent, let's start with you. That's an awful question.
Yes, it's a hard question.
It's
kind of tied up with everything around me, of course. And I guess in order to feel at peace with myself, I have to be willing to do the right thing in the situations I find in my life. I would think
that's a hard one to follow. Jack, what about you?
think the most important thing in my life is to try to live according to what we've written in our book. You know, just because we wrote the book doesn't mean that we automatically follow every one of the tips and principles that we've written into the book. So I find that fairly often I'll catch myself in some kind of behavior that I don't feel really is the right behavior. And so I'm trying to be more sensitive and aware when I offend somebody or I do something that is, you can just tell as soon as you do it that it was not a very inspired instance of behavior. And so then to take myself on and look at that and say, now how do I need to change my behavior so that I don't do that anymore? And so I'm trying to be as in sync with our book as I possibly can. And believe me, I find that there's plenty of opportunities to work on becoming a better person.
You have to practice being conscious.
Yes, absolutely. We are at the end. I thank both of you so much.
Well, thank you for having us on your program.
It's my pleasure.
You.
And I think I'm sure you've inspired thousands of our viewers. No, really, I'm not being facetious. And I hope you continue working with the horsies.
Me too.
Oh, yeah. And Jack, I only wish you the best with
Thank
your
you.
book and whatever else you do. And I didn't tell the audience that you ride your bike from Cupertino to Palo Alto by yourself. Anyway, thank you so much and good luck.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. I want to thank our crew. We have, and I use this word not loosely, but we have a fabulous, adorable crew. I thank them so much, and of course I thank my audience for watching, and I can't wait to see you next time, really. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.